What happened to Altoona, Pennsylvania? Altoona, Pennsylvania stands as one of the most fascinating examples of American industrial rise and decline. Once a thriving railroad hub that employed over 14,000 people and boasted a population of more than 82,000, this central Pennsylvania city has seen its fortunes dramatically reversed. Today, with barely 43,000 residents, Altoona represents nearly half of what it once was. This is the story of a city built by the rails, sustained by the rails, and ultimately abandoned when the rails no longer mattered. This is what happened to Altoona, Pennsylvania. Music. Chapter 1. The Geographic Challenge. To understand Altoona's story, we must first understand the landscape that created it. Central Pennsylvania in the early 1800s presented a formidable challenge to anyone attempting to connect the eastern and western parts of the state. The Allegheny Ridge, a massive natural barrier, stood like a wall across the Commonwealth, making continuous transportation nearly impossible. Before the railroad, the solution was both ingenious and cumbersome. Canal boats traveling from Philadelphia would reach the base of the ridge and face an impossible climb. The answer was the Allegheny Portage Railroad, completed in 1834, which literally carried canal boats up and over the mountain using a series of inclined planes and stationary steam engines. Boats would be placed on railroad cars and hauled up one side of the mountain, then lowered down the other side to continue their journey to Pittsburgh. This system, while revolutionary for its time, was slow, expensive, and weather-dependent. It could take days to transport goods across the state, and winter weather often shut down operations entirely. The bottleneck at the Allegheny Ridge was strangling Pennsylvania's economic growth and hampering westward expansion. The Pennsylvania Railroad, chartered in 1846, recognized that whoever could solve this transportation puzzle would control commerce across one of America's most important states. The solution they devised would not only revolutionize transportation, but would give birth to a city that would become synonymous with American railroading. Chapter 2. The Horseshoe Curve and the Birth of Altoona. The Pennsylvania Railroad's chief engineer, J. Edgar Thomson, faced a seemingly impossible task: how to get trains over the Allegheny Ridge without the crushing grades that would make rail transport impractical. The solution was audacious in its simplicity and brilliant in its execution. If you can't go over the mountain efficiently, go around it. Thomson designed what would become known as the Horseshoe Curve, a sweeping 2,375-foot radius curve that would allow trains to gain elevation gradually while following the natural contours of the mountainside. The curve would rise 122 feet while traveling 2.8 miles, creating a manageable grade that trains could handle while carrying heavy loads. Construction began in 1850, and it was a monumental undertaking. Hundreds of workers, many of them Irish immigrants, carved the roadbed out of solid rock using hand tools, black powder, and sheer determination. They worked through brutal winters and sweltering summers, moving tons of earth and stone to create what would become one of the engineering marvels of the 19th century. But the Horseshoe Curve needed support infrastructure, and that's where Altoona comes in. The Pennsylvania Railroad established a construction camp at the base of the curve to house workers and store materials. This camp, initially called Altoona, after a town in Georgia, would become the foundation of the city. When the line opened in 1854, connecting Philadelphia to Pittsburgh in a continuous rail journey for the first time, Altoona was officially incorporated. The city was born not from natural resources or geographic advantages, but from the pure necessity of maintaining and operating one of America's most important transportation links. Chapter 3. The Railroad Boom Years. The completion of the Pennsylvania Railroad's main line transformed Altoona from a construction camp into a booming industrial city almost overnight. The railroad didn't just pass through Altoona, it made Altoona its operational heart for the western division of the line. The Pennsylvania Railroad established the Altoona Works in 1850, initially as a repair facility for locomotives, making the challenging journey over the Allegheny Mountains. But as traffic increased and the railroad expanded, the Altoona Works grew into something much more significant, one of the largest locomotive manufacturing and repair facilities in the world. The numbers tell the story of Altoona's explosive growth. In 1860, the city had a population of just over 2,000. By 1880, that number had swelled to nearly 20,000, a tenfold increase in just 2 decades. The growth continued relentlessly, 30,000 by 1900, 52,000 by 1910, and reaching its peak of 82,054 in 1910, 1,930. This wasn't just population growth, it was the creation of an entire industrial ecosystem. The Altoona Works employed thousands of skilled craftsmen who could build a locomotive from scratch. Machinists, boilermakers, blacksmiths, pattern makers, and dozens of other specialized trades called Altoona Home. The facility could produce a complete locomotive in just 30 days, and at its peak, it was turning out more than 100 locomotives per year. The Pennsylvania Railroad's dominance in Altoona was absolute. At its height in the mid-1920s, the railroad employed 14,000 people in the city, more than 80% of the entire workforce. Virtually every family in Altoona had some connection to the railroad, whether directly through employment or indirectly through the businesses that served the railroad workers and their families. The city developed a distinct character shaped by its railroad heritage. Company housing lined the streets near the shops, built in neat rows that reflected the railroad's emphasis on efficiency and order. The Pennsylvania Railroad provided not just jobs, but also social services, company stores, recreational facilities, and even a company hospital. The railroad was more than an employer, it was the foundation of the entire community. Chapter 4: The Golden Age of Steam. The 1920s represented the absolute pinnacle of Altoona's prosperity and influence. The city had become synonymous with locomotive excellence, producing some of the most powerful and innovative steam engines ever built. The Altoona Works wasn't just manufacturing locomotives, it was pushing the boundaries of railroad technology. During this golden age, Altoona produced legendary locomotives that would become icons of American railroading. The Pennsylvania Railroad's famous K4S Pacific locomotives, considered among the finest passenger engines ever built, rolled out of Altoona's shops. These magnificent machines, with their distinctive Belpaire fireboxes and elegant lines, would haul the railroad's premier passenger trains like the Broadway Limited between New York and Chicago. But it was in freight service where Altoona truly excelled. The city's shops produced massive freight locomotives designed to handle the heavy coal trains that were the Pennsylvania Railroad's bread and butter. The railroad's M1 and M1, a mountain-type locomotives built in Altoona, could haul mile-long coal trains over the challenging grades of the Allegheny Mountains. The test plant at Altoona became world-renowned for its locomotive testing capabilities. Engineers from around the globe came to study the innovations emerging from the Pennsylvania Railroad's research and development efforts. The plant could simulate operating conditions and measure locomotive performance with unprecedented precision, leading to improvements in efficiency and power that benefited railroads worldwide. The prosperity of the 1920s extended far beyond the railroad shops. Downtown Altoona bustled with activity as railroad workers spent their substantial paychecks at local businesses. The city boasted elegant department stores, fine restaurants, and entertainment venues that rivaled those in much larger cities. The Penn Alto Hotel, built by the Pennsylvania Railroad, was considered one of the finest hotels between New York and Chicago. Cultural life flourished as well. The Mishler Theater, opened in 1906, brought touring Broadway shows and vaudeville acts to Altoona. The city supported multiple newspapers, social clubs, and recreational organizations. Baseball was particularly popular, with the Altoona Rams drawing crowds of railroad workers eager to cheer for their hometown team. But beneath this prosperity lay a dangerous vulnerability that few recognized at the time. Altoona had become a classic company town, utterly dependent on a single industry and a single employer. The Pennsylvania Railroad was so dominant that the city had never developed significant alternative industries. This specialization had made Altoona incredibly prosperous during the railroad boom, but it would prove catastrophic when the industry began to decline. Chapter 5. The Beginning of the End. The first cracks in Altoona's foundation appeared in the 1930s, though few recognized them as harbingers of the city's eventual decline. The Great Depression hit Altoona hard, as reduced freight traffic and passenger travel led to layoffs at the railroad shops. But the city's residents, accustomed to the cyclical nature of the railroad business, assumed this was just another temporary downturn. More ominous was a technological shift that was beginning to reshape the entire railroad industry. Diesel-electric locomotives, first introduced in the 1930s, offered significant advantages over steam engines. They were more fuel efficient, required less maintenance, and could operate longer distances without servicing. The Pennsylvania Railroad, like most major railroads, began experimenting with diesel power for switching and branch line service. The Altoona Works, designed and equipped for steam locomotive production and maintenance, was poorly positioned for this technological transition. The skills that had made Altoona's workforce legendary, the ability to work with fire, steam, and heavy mechanical components, were becoming less relevant in an age of electrical systems and internal combustion engines. World War II provided a temporary reprieve. The massive increase in freight traffic and the need to move troops and supplies across the country brought renewed prosperity to Altoona. The shops worked around the clock and employment soared. Many residents believed this marked a return to the good times, not realizing it was actually the last hurrah of the steam age. The war also accelerated technological change in ways that would prove devastating to Altoona. The development of improved highways and more reliable trucks began to chip away at the railroad's monopoly on freight transportation. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, which opened its first section in 1940, just 30 miles south of Altoona, demonstrated that automobiles and trucks could provide faster, more flexible transportation than trains for many types of cargo and passengers. Perhaps most significantly, the war demonstrated the strategic importance of a robust highway system for national defense. This realization would lead directly to the interstate highway system, which would fundamentally reshape American transportation and deal a devastating blow to passenger rail service. Chapter 6. The Diesel Revolution. The end of World War II marked the beginning of the end for steam locomotives and, by extension, for Altoona's economic foundation. Railroads across America, flush with wartime profits and facing increased competition from trucks and airlines, began massive dieselization programs. The Pennsylvania Railroad, despite its long commitment to steam power and its substantial investment in the Altoona Works, could not ignore the economic advantages of diesel locomotives. Diesels required less maintenance, could operate longer distances without servicing, and didn't need the extensive water and coaling facilities that steam engines required. In 1957, the Pennsylvania Railroad made a decision that would seal Altoona's fate. The company announced the end of steam locomotive production and the conversion of the Altoona Works to diesel maintenance. But rather than retooling the massive Altoona facility, the railroad chose to build new, smaller maintenance facilities closer to major terminals. The impact on Altoona was immediate and devastating. Thousands of skilled craftsmen found their specialized knowledge obsolete overnight. The massive foundries, machine shops, and assembly buildings that had employed generations of Altoona families began to empty. Employment at the railroad shops, which had peaked at 14,000 in the 1920s, plummeted to fewer than 8,000 by 1960 and continued to decline. The city's leadership, recognizing the crisis, made desperate attempts to attract new industry. They promoted Altoona's skilled workforce, its central location, and its transportation connections. But the very factors that had made Altoona successful in the railroad age, its specialization and its location optimized for rail transportation, made it less attractive to modern industries that relied on highway access and diverse supply chains. The Pennsylvania Railroad itself was struggling. Increased competition from trucks, airlines, and private automobiles was eroding both freight and passenger traffic. The railroad's financial condition deteriorated throughout the 1960s, leading to further cutbacks in Altoona operations. Chapter 7. The Interstate Highway Revolution. While Altoona was grappling with the decline of the railroad industry, a transportation revolution was taking place that would further marginalize the city. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, which created the interstate highway system, fundamentally altered American transportation patterns and dealt another devastating blow to Altoona's prospects. The new interstate highways offered several advantages over rail transportation: door-to-door service, flexible scheduling, and no need for intermediate handling of cargo. For passengers, automobiles provided privacy, convenience, and the freedom to travel on their own schedules. Airlines, meanwhile, offered speed for long-distance travel that trains simply couldn't match. Pennsylvania's interstate highways largely bypassed Altoona, reflecting the city's declining importance in the state's transportation network. Interstate 80, which crosses Pennsylvania from east to west, passes more than 30 miles north of the city. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, expanded and improved throughout the 1950s and 1960s, runs 30 miles to the south. This geographic isolation from major highway corridors further reduced Altoona's attractiveness to new businesses and industries. The impact on passenger rail service was particularly severe. The Pennsylvania Railroad's famous passenger trains, which had once made Altoona a regular stop, began to disappear. The Broadway Limited, the railroad's flagship train between New York and Chicago, was rerouted to bypass Altoona in 1967. Other passenger services were discontinued entirely as ridership plummeted. By 1970, when Amtrak took over most intercity passenger rail service in the United States, Altoona had lost virtually all of its passenger train connections. The city that had once been a major stop on one of America's most important rail corridors was now isolated from the national transportation network. Chapter 8. Corporate Consolidation and Decline. The 1960s brought a series of corporate changes that would further erode Altoona's economic base. In 1968, the Pennsylvania Railroad merged with its longtime rival, the New York Central, to form Penn Central. The merger was intended to create efficiencies and reduce costs, but it also meant redundant facilities would be closed or consolidated. Altoona, with its aging infrastructure and high labor costs, was an obvious target for cutbacks. The new Penn Central Corporation began systematically reducing operations at the Altoona Works, transferring work to more modern facilities and laying off hundreds of workers. The Penn Central merger proved to be a disaster. The combined railroad was poorly managed, financially unstable, and unable to compete effectively with trucks and airlines. In 1970, just 2 years after the merger, Penn Central filed for bankruptcy, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history at that time. The bankruptcy had immediate consequences for Altoona. Maintenance was deferred, facilities were closed, and employment continued to decline. The city that had once been the proud heart of American railroading was now associated with a failed corporation and a declining industry. When Conrail was formed in 1976 to take over Penn Central and other bankrupt northeastern railroads, Altoona's role was further diminished. Conrail consolidated operations, closed redundant facilities, and focused on profitable freight corridors. The Altoona Works, once the crown jewel of American locomotive manufacturing, was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Chapter 9. Population Exodus and Urban Decline. The economic decline of Altoona's railroad industry had predictable demographic consequences. Young people, seeing no future in their hometown, began leaving for opportunities in other cities. Families that had lived in Altoona for generations packed up and moved to places where jobs were available. The population statistics tell the story starkly. From its peak of 82,054 in 1930, Altoona's population began a steady decline that has continued to this day. By 1950, the population had dropped to 77,177. The 1960 census showed 69,407 residents, and by 1970, the number had fallen to 63,115. The decline accelerated in the following decades. Altoona lost approximately 9 to 10% of its population every decade from 1950 to 1990. The 1980 census recorded 57,078 residents, and by 1990, the population had fallen to 51,881. The 2000 census showed 49,523 people, and the 2010 count was 46,320. This wasn't just a numbers game, it was the hollowing out of a community. The people leaving were often the youngest and most educated, those with the skills and mobility to find opportunities elsewhere. Left behind were older residents, those with fewer resources, and those too attached to the community to leave despite the economic challenges. The physical landscape of Altoona began to reflect this decline. Downtown businesses closed as customers moved away or shopped at suburban malls. Historic buildings fell into disrepair as property values declined and maintenance became unaffordable. Entire neighborhoods saw houses abandoned as families left for opportunities elsewhere. The city's infrastructure, built to serve a much larger population, became increasingly expensive to maintain. Streets, water systems, and public buildings designed for 82,000 residents now served fewer than 50,000, creating a crushing burden on the remaining taxpayers. The city found itself in a vicious cycle. Declining population led to reduced tax revenue, which led to reduced services, which made the city less attractive and accelerated further population loss. The social fabric of the community began to fray as well. Churches that had served large congregations for decades found themselves struggling to maintain their buildings and programs. Schools that had once been filled with the children of railroad workers now faced declining enrollment and budget cuts. The sense of community pride that had sustained Altoona through previous challenges was severely tested as residents watched their city slowly empty out. Chapter 10: The Search for Economic Alternatives. As the railroad industry's decline became undeniable, Altoona's civic and business leaders desperately searched for economic alternatives. The city's location in central Pennsylvania, once an advantage for rail transportation, proved to be a liability in attracting new industries that relied on highway access and proximity to major metropolitan areas. Various economic development initiatives were launched throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The city promoted itself as a distribution center, emphasizing its central location within Pennsylvania and its transportation connections. Industrial parks were developed on the outskirts of town, offering modern facilities and highway access to potential employers. Some success stories emerged from these efforts. Sheetz, the convenience store and gas station chain, established its headquarters in Altoona in 1952 and grew throughout the latter half of the 20th century. The company became the second largest employer in Blair County, providing hundreds of jobs and demonstrating that new businesses could succeed in Altoona. However, even Sheetz's success couldn't offset the massive job losses in the railroad industry. The city also attempted to leverage its railroad heritage for tourism. The Horseshoe Curve, recognized as a National Historic Landmark, began attracting railroad enthusiasts and tourists interested in transportation history. The Railroaders Memorial Museum was established to preserve and interpret Altoona's railroad legacy. While these tourism initiatives provided some economic benefit, they could never replace the thousands of high-paying manufacturing jobs that had been lost. Healthcare emerged as another significant employer, with UPMC Altoona, formerly Altoona Hospital, becoming one of the largest employers in the region. The service sector gradually replaced manufacturing as the dominant part of Altoona's economy, but service jobs typically paid less than the skilled manufacturing positions that had sustained the city's middle class for decades. Chapter 11. The broader regional context. Altoona's decline didn't occur in isolation. It was part of a broader pattern of deindustrialization that affected much of Pennsylvania and the Rust Belt. Nearby cities faced similar challenges as their traditional industries declined. Johnstown, about 30 miles southeast of Altoona, saw its steel industry collapse, leading to massive job losses and population decline. Pittsburgh, the region's largest city, struggled with the decline of its steel industry throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The coal industry, which had been closely linked to the railroads and had provided another source of employment in the region, also faced severe challenges. Environmental concerns, competition from other energy sources, and changing technology reduced demand for Pennsylvania coal. Mining communities throughout central and western Pennsylvania experienced their own versions of Altoona's decline. This regional context made Altoona's recovery even more difficult. The city wasn't just competing with distant locations for new businesses. It was competing with other struggling communities in the same region, all offering similar incentives and facing similar challenges. The entire economic ecosystem that had supported Altoona, the network of suppliers, customers, and related industries, was also in decline. The state of Pennsylvania itself struggled to adapt to these economic changes. The loss of manufacturing jobs and population in cities like Altoona, Johnstown, and Erie reduced the state's political influence and tax base. State resources for economic development were limited, and competition for those resources was intense. Chapter 12. Cultural and Social Transformation. The economic transformation of Altoona was accompanied by profound cultural and social changes. The city that had once been defined by its railroad identity struggled to develop a new sense of purpose and community cohesion. The loss of the railroad industry meant more than just job losses. It meant the disappearance of a way of life that had defined Altoona for more than a century. Railroad work had provided not just employment, but also a sense of pride and identity. Railroad workers were skilled craftsmen who took pride in their ability to build and maintain the powerful locomotives that moved America's commerce. The loss of this industry left a cultural void that was difficult to fill. The demographic changes also altered the city's character. As young families left for opportunities elsewhere, Altoona's population aged significantly. The median age increased steadily, and the city found itself with a growing population of retirees and elderly residents who had deep roots in the community but limited economic resources. Educational institutions faced particular challenges. The Pennsylvania State University's Altoona campus, established in 1939, provided some stability and attracted students from outside the region. However, many of the brightest local students left for college and never returned, contributing to the brain drain that affected many Rust Belt communities. The city's ethnic character also evolved. Altoona had been built by waves of immigrants, Irish, German, Italian, and Eastern European workers who came to work on the railroad. These ethnic communities had maintained distinct neighborhoods, churches, and cultural traditions for generations. As the population declined and dispersed, some of these cultural institutions struggled to survive. Chapter 13. Modern Challenges and Adaptations. By the 1990s and 2000s, Altoona had stabilized at a much smaller size, but continued to face significant challenges. The city's infrastructure, built for a much larger population, required constant maintenance and upgrades that strained the municipal budget. Many of the grand buildings from Altoona's heyday, the ornate railroad shops, the elegant downtown commercial buildings, the substantial residential neighborhoods, required expensive maintenance or faced demolition. The opioid crisis hit Altoona particularly hard, as it did many communities struggling with economic decline and limited opportunities. The combination of economic despair, social isolation, and readily available drugs created a public health emergency that further strained the city's resources and damaged its reputation. Crime, while not at the levels seen in larger cities, became more of a concern as economic opportunities dwindled and social problems increased. The city's police force, like other municipal services, had to do more with less as the tax base continued to shrink. However, Altoona also demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability. Community organizations worked to preserve the city's historic character while promoting economic development. The downtown area saw some revitalization efforts, with historic buildings converted to new uses and small businesses encouraged to locate in the city center. The city's location, while no longer advantageous for rail transportation, offered some benefits in the modern economy. Altoona's position in central Pennsylvania provided access to major metropolitan areas like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. within a few hours' drive. Some residents began commuting to jobs in these larger cities while maintaining their homes in Altoona, where housing costs were significantly lower. Chapter 14: Norfolk Southern and the Railroad Legacy. While the Pennsylvania Railroad was long gone, railroading didn't completely disappear from Altoona. Norfolk Southern, formed through a series of mergers and acquisitions, maintained operations in the city, though at a much reduced scale compared to the Pennsylvania Railroad's heyday. The Norfolk Southern facility in Altoona continued to employ several hundred workers in locomotive maintenance and repair operations. However, modern railroad operations required far fewer workers than the labor-intensive steam era. Computerized systems, improved reliability, and longer maintenance intervals meant that a handful of technicians could now do work that once required dozens of craftsmen. The company periodically announced layoffs and consolidations, each one sending ripples of concern through the community. Railroad employment, which had once provided stable, well-paying careers for thousands of Altoona families, now offered jobs for only a few hundred workers, and even those positions were subject to the volatile economics of the modern railroad industry. Despite the reduced scale, the railroad's presence remained symbolically important to Altoona. The city's identity was still closely tied to its railroad heritage, and residents took pride in the fact that trains still passed through their community, even if most no longer stopped. The Horseshoe Curve continued to attract visitors and remained an active part of the Norfolk Southern system. Freight trains still negotiated the famous curve daily, carrying containers and coal cars over the same route that had given birth to Altoona more than 150 years earlier. Chapter 15: Lessons and Reflections. Altoona's story offers important lessons about economic development, urban planning, and the risks of over-specialization. The city's rise and fall illustrate both the tremendous opportunities and the inherent vulnerabilities of being a company town dependent on a single industry. During its heyday, Altoona's specialization in railroad technology made it incredibly prosperous. The city's workers were among the highest paid in Pennsylvania, and the community enjoyed amenities and cultural opportunities that rivaled much larger cities. The Pennsylvania Railroad's investment in Altoona created a self-reinforcing cycle of growth and prosperity that lasted for nearly a century. However, this same specialization became a fatal weakness when the industry changed. Unlike more diversified cities that could adapt to economic transitions, Altoona had few alternatives when the railroad industry declined. The skills, infrastructure, and economic relationships that had made the city successful were all tied to a single technology and a single company. The story also illustrates the importance of transportation networks in urban development. Altoona was created by a transportation innovation, the Horseshoe Curve, and its decline was accelerated by new transportation technologies that bypassed the city. The interstate highway system, which revolutionized American transportation in the latter half of the 20th century, largely ignored Altoona, reflecting the city's reduced importance in the national transportation network. Chapter 16: The Human Cost. Behind the statistics and economic analysis lies the human story of Altoona's decline. thousands of families saw their way of life disappear as the railroad industry contracted. Workers who had expected to follow their fathers and grandfathers into stable railroad careers found themselves unemployed or forced to leave their hometown to find work. The psychological impact of this transition was profound. Many residents had defined themselves through their connection to the railroad industry. Railroad work wasn't just a job, it was a source of identity and community pride. The loss of this industry created not just economic hardship, but also a crisis of identity that affected the entire community. Families that had lived in Altoona for generations faced difficult choices. Should they stay in a community they loved, but that offered limited opportunities? Or should they leave for uncertain prospects elsewhere? Many chose to stay, accepting lower wages and fewer opportunities in exchange for maintaining their community connections and family ties. The elderly were particularly affected by the city's decline. Retirees who had expected to spend their golden years in a thriving community instead found themselves in a city struggling with abandoned buildings, reduced services, and limited amenities. Many had invested their life savings in homes that were now worth a fraction of their original value. Young people faced their own challenges. Those who wanted to stay in Altoona often had to accept jobs that didn't match their education or ambitions. Those who left often felt guilty about abandoning their hometown and families, but saw no viable alternative. Conclusion: Altoona today and tomorrow. Today, Altoona exists as a much smaller but still functioning city in central Pennsylvania. With a population of approximately 43,000, it has stabilized at roughly half its peak size. The city has adapted to its new reality, focusing on healthcare, education, and service industries rather than manufacturing. The railroad heritage remains an important part of Altoona's identity, even though rail employment represents only a small fraction of the local economy. The Railroaders Memorial Museum, the Horseshoe Curve, and other historic sites attract thousands of visitors each year, providing some economic benefit and helping to preserve the city's unique history. Altoona's story is not unique among American cities. Across the Rust Belt and beyond, communities that were built around single industries have struggled to adapt to economic change. Some, like Pittsburgh, have successfully reinvented themselves. Others, like Detroit, have faced even more severe challenges than Altoona. Still others continue to search for their new identity and economic foundation. What makes Altoona's story particularly poignant is the dramatic nature of its rise and fall. The city went from a construction camp to a major industrial center in just a few decades, then saw that prosperity slowly slip away over the course of another half-century. It's a reminder of how quickly economic fortunes can change and how important it is for communities to diversify their economic base. The city may never again reach the heights it achieved during the railroad boom, but it doesn't necessarily need to. Altoona today offers its residents a lower cost of living, a strong sense of community, and a rich historical heritage. For those who choose to call it home, it remains a place where neighbors know each other, where history is tangible, and where the echoes of America's industrial past still resonates through the mountains of central Pennsylvania. The trains still run through Altoona, their whistles echoing off the same hills that heard the first locomotives more than 170 years ago. The Horseshoe Curve still carries freight across the Allegheny Ridge, a testament to the engineering vision that created this city. And in the quiet moments between the passing trains, you can almost hear the sounds of the great railroad shops that once made Altoona the heartbeat of American transportation. This is what happened to Altoona, Pennsylvania, a city built by the rails, sustained by the rails, and forever shaped by their legacy, even as it searches for its place in a world that has moved beyond the age of steam and steel.